Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Thursday's edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. Joining me in the studio this evening is our regular contributor, Chris McCusker. Good evening, Chris. And Chris, Chris is from the SNP's Socialist Group. And joining me on your right-hand side of your screen is Effie Samara, a writer and an academic. Welcome back, Effie.
Hello. Hi, Gordon.
Okay, so we're going to get launched into, as usual, our coronavirus update. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 289,646 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland laboratories and the UK government's regional testing centres. And of these, 271,331 were confirmed negative. 18,315 were positive. There are 6 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. And today there have been 0 new deaths of people who have tested positive reported. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases, with not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have been tested positive, 342 were in hospital last night, 3 of whom were in intensive care, plus 6 more people in intensive care with suspected COVID-19. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 2,490. This number only includes those who have died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 44,602 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 85. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And now to today's first story. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, in a statement today, outlined the moving into phase 3 of easing the lockdown restrictions. Scotland will officially move to a phase 3 of the route map out of lockdown. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced today, Thursday the 9th of July. From tomorrow, Friday the 10th of July, up to 3 households will be able to meet indoors for the first time, up to a maximum of 8 people. Meanwhile, up to 5 different households, to a maximum of 15 people, tomorrow will be able to meet outdoors. A household can meet up to 4 other households per day in total. 2-metre distancing between households should continue with heightened hygiene measures to avoid creating bridges which allow the virus to spread. Mandatory face coverings will be required in shops, and physical distancing of 2 metres remains the law. However, on public transport and in retail settings, exceptions will be allowed once appropriate mitigations are in place. From Monday, the 13th of July, organised outdoor play and contact sports can resume for children and young people under 18, subject to guidance. Non-essential shops inside shopping centres can reopen, and dental practices can see registered patients for non-aerosol procedures. From Wednesday, the 15th of July, indoor restaurants, cafes and pubs will be able to reopen. Hospitality venues can be granted an exception to the 2-metre distancing requirement. However, this requires mitigating measures to be in place, such as clear information for customers, revised seating plans, and all hospitality venues are required to record contact details of customers to support test and protect. All holiday accommodation can reopen from Wednesday, as well as the childcare sector, hairdressers and barbers. Museums, galleries, cinemas and libraries can also open from Wednesday with strict physical distancing, and for many of these facilities, advanced ticketing will be required. Places of worship can reopen from Wednesday for communal prayer, congregational service and contemplation with limited attendance numbers and physical distancing. Specific guidance is being finalised with faith communities. Restrictions on attendance at services and ceremonies for funerals, weddings and civil partnerships will be eased, although full-scale gatherings are still not permitted, and some mitigation measures will remain. During the statement to Parliament, the First Minister said Scotland has made major progress in tackling COVID-19. Prevalence of the virus in Scotland is now several times lower than it is across the United Kingdom as a whole. And it is because of that action that we can now move into phase 3. Today marks the most significant milestone yet in Scotland's emergence from lockdown. measures announced today are, of course, dependent on us keeping the virus under control, and we will not hesitate to reimpose restrictions if we consider it necessary to halt the spread of the virus and to save lives. Effie, if I can come to you first for your comments on this. There's a great deal of detail in here, Effie, but can I ask you, what do you think jumps out at you, first of all, from the various pieces of information in that announcement today?
Well, for myself, I think the hospitality industry, obviously the economic pressures are huge. It needs to happen the way our economy runs. Capitalist economies run on money concerns prior to welfare. I personally think it's early. We don't know enough about this virus. The virus is far too contagious. But, the United Kingdom government has decided that this is the time for this to happen. There is some discretion up here as to how we go about it, and obviously that hence the delay. But the hospitality and the restaurants are my concern. And also the fact that people are getting quite brave, Gordon. I was out today, just popped out to get a prescription for my dad. And the difference between today and, last week is actually really, really, visually very impactful. So the Braehead Centre was absolutely, we could not get a parking space at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I don't know. I also follow Devi Stritha on Twitter, the public health official from Edinburgh University. And I understand she also has some concerns about how brave we are getting and what's actually happening. And she's been talking about, what our priorities are. Is this about restaurants and pubs? And we've seen the scenes in Soho last week. Or is this about schools and children? So, initial thoughts. There you go.
Okay. Chris, if I could come to you next. What's your reaction to today's announcements from the First Minister?
I'm going to be controversial and say that there was nothing in it for the aviation sector. But then that's not down to the Scottish Government, that's down to Westminster. And there was nothing in it that Kate Forbes had advocated for. So whilst I welcome the hospitality sector slowly getting back up to sort of like half speed, I was really dismayed that there was nothing in it for my fellow colleagues in the aviation industry.
It must be disappointing for you, Chris. I understand that. But surely the news that holiday accommodation can reopen, childcare, hairdressers, barbers, a lot of the things that we would normally take for granted from next Wednesday, we will be able to do again. I think it must be a great relief to many people.
Oh yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I didn't come on tonight to be a complete doommonger.
Wouldn't be like you,
I personally will, choose to have a staycation. I've been looking at those sort of like wooden huts, wooden caravan things that you can get,
chalets and.
I'm quite happy to stay in Scotland and spend my money in Scotland. Don't get me wrong, but from my colleagues at Glasgow Airport and stuff like that, then they didn't get what they wanted and stuff. And a few of my comrades were actually petitioning outside Holyrood this afternoon. From the GMB and from Unite.
Of course, Chris, there's not very much the Scottish Government can actually do at the moment to help with...
I honestly, I am the first one to recognise that and all the rest of it. I know who's at fault here. Let's not beat about the bush as the UK Government. But I mean, there's other things in it as well today as well. I welcome the opening up to the shielding group and stuff like that. My cousin has been shielding, and she's desperate to get back to work. She's been told that her next update will be the 31st of July. Works for Tesco's. So there are other food stores, by the way.
Okay.
But yeah, so you know, so she's really, really wanting to get back to work. But you know, she's more than happy the fact that she can meet someone else and she can have someone else in her house and stuff like that. So that's a good thing.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Effie, if I could come back to you for a comment on the fact that children can now take part in organised outdoor sports again. Surely this must be great for young mums and dads who've had their kids under their feet for the last 10 or 12 weeks to get them outside again and back to doing what they enjoy.
Well, you know what? I am going to be, again, you got controversial people on your show tonight, Gord. Oh. I am going to be controversial and say I actually enjoy having her with me the whole time. So
well, that's very nice.
I'm okay with it, but it's, you know, I think it's brilliant that this is happening. And also what's very encouraging is obviously the medical data on children continues, although we've had some tragic cases, but they have been so few that I'm not quite sure that the medical data, you know, it points in the direction that they are able to do this safely. Yeah. So, yeah, a relief to as you say, parents and moms, especially moms who have been homeschooling for a long, long time, much as I've loved it. And I'm happy to carry on doing it. Yeah. But great, obviously, because given the weather as well, it's good for their health to get a bit of sun.
Yeah. Effie, another thing which sprang to my mind, and my wife has been desperate for this for the last few weeks, and that is being able to go to the hairdressers, something which most women take for granted and has been denied them for months. How do you feel about hairdressers reopening?
Okay, you know what? You just asked me the wrong question. I'm not a hairdresser's girl, so
you're not
the hair
a typical hairdresser.
I cut it myself and my daughter. So that's it, and I do what I do with it, and you know I'm okay with it. But obviously, in terms of the economic impact that it's had, a lot of the hairdressers are individual businesses, are kept by literally one or two business partners, and it must be great.
And of course,
the one
local.
thing that I need to say is I'm not quite sure about the face masks, and I really would encourage people, regardless of guideline, to please wear a face mask, because it is something that is close physical contact.
I think it's mandatory to wear a face mask in these particular situations, Effie, in shops from Friday. Chris, you were talking about holidays there. There's been a great deal made of people coming north from England into Scotland. Do you think having the announcement now that basically hotels and accommodation are going to be open from next Wednesday, do you think that's going to pose a problem for people travelling into Scotland? Do you think there'll be too many?
Well, I hope it doesn't, because I want people to be able to, come to Scotland and help our tourism economy and our hospitality. But by the same token, I don't want people to be coming over the border that have, potentially got COVID or even symptoms. But there's, again, I've got to go back. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Chris. Chris, just can you sit back a little bit from the camera, Chris? We've got you turned all in one corner of the screen at the moment. Yeah, that's better, Chris. About there, thank you. Okay, well, moving on to our next story this evening, and the threat to jobs as the furlough scheme ends prematurely. The SNP has said that the threat of mass redundancies is growing after the Tory government confirmed that it would cut off the furlough scheme prematurely and failed to deliver the financial powers and scale of funds needed to secure a strong recovery. Following the Chancellor's statement yesterday, 4 major UK companies have announced job losses, with around 10,000 jobs at risk at Boots, Burger King, John Lewis and Rolls-Royce. Meanwhile, economic experts, businesses and trades unions have echoed concerns raised by the SNP that measures announced do not go far enough to protect jobs and to prevent lasting damage to the economy. Alison Thewliss MP said the Tory government must come back with a comprehensive plan to protect jobs, or it would be directly responsible for thousands of unnecessary redundancies. The SNP Shadow Chancellor is calling for a fiscal stimulus recovery package of at least £80 billion, or 4% of GDP, the extension to the furlough schemes into 2020, and the devolution of financial powers to the Scottish Parliament. Chris, I think I'll hand this one to you first of all, because this includes a lot, actually, about what the Scottish Government has been wanting Rishi Sunak to do for a while with regards to trying to keep redundancies to a minimum. The question in my mind, and I guess you'll probably answer this in one word, is do you think Rishi Sunak will go in any way towards this goal of the SNP?
It was a long wish list that Kate Forbes put out, and it was never going to be granted. Never going to be granted. And and a funny thing as well, I was talking to my son today. I was listening to James O'Brien, and James O'Brien put a really, really weird slant on things, and basically said that Rishi Sunak actually delivered a kind of socialist budget.
It was a strange budget.
Insofar as he basically gave UBI to all the business owners. So the business owners are going to
but not to the people.
Pounds for keeping people on, and then they can pay them off.
So basically, it's the Conservative version of UBI is to give the money to the businesses and not to the people who actually need it.
Correct.
Yes. I see. Yes. Okay. Yes. Effie, can I bring you in at this point? What do you make of? Well, first of all, the SNP's list of demands or things that they really would like to see. Is there anything in that list actually that you think wasn't there that should be?
Well, I will echo Chris. I would say what comes to mind as a very, very brief response to your question is probably a straight UBI a request for that to be granted, which is going to be a no. They're not going to do it. But just to analyze a little bit further what Rishi Sunak has been offering as part of, I believe, in addition to the meal deal that was announced yesterday,
yes, that was bizarre.
Only a very small portion. Think about the German fiscal stimulus package, 130 billion, and it combines all manner of things. The tax cuts, direct payments to households, spending measures spread over the next 2 years. It amounts to more than 3% of Germany's annual gross domestic product. So the fact that they're coming out on television, because obviously they own the media and they can market this as something huge, it actually is not. For considering how rich the country is and who the United Kingdom are. So this is nowhere near. There are no economic automatic stabilizers there. There is no real fiscal stimulus. And basically, when you're thinking about the consequentials and what's going to end up reaching this part of the world up here in Scotland, it's I would go as far as to say it's negligible.
Yeah. Okay, back to you, Chris. Now, the list of things which was made there by the SNP, things which would be needed, the one that caught my eye particularly was the extension of the furlough scheme into 2021. Now, we know the furlough scheme is going to be ended early, and I also know from personal experience, because my own daughter is going back to work fairly soon, that we know that furlough is going to be wound down much more quickly than we thought. Is there a case, do you think, for the furlough to be delayed in Scotland or maybe in Wales and Northern Ireland at a different time from the rest of the United Kingdom?
Well, see, this is something that I can understand because quite reasonably Kate Forbes said to Rishi Sunak, look, give us the levers that would allow us to borrow, and we will borrow and we will extend the furlough period for as long as Scotland needs it. And yet that was denied. A perfectly reasonable request, and it was torn down because the Tories don't want to give us any more powers than what we've already got at the moment. And quite frankly, the powers that we have at the moment, they would take back overnight.
Well, because we only have
quicker than a blink of an eye.
We only control, I think it's about 15%, Chris, of our taxes, something like that.
Yeah. They would be quite happy. They would be quite happy to take us back. I actually seen one report where the fiscal framework that they're talking about, this common framework going forward into 2021. Basically, I personally think the whole subject of the power grab has come up again, and I think that it's the English Parliament's intention to take as much powers away from Scotland as possible and reduce Holyrood to having the powers of a regional council.
Chris,
and that's why they wouldn't give us the powers of borrowing, because basically if we are in charge of our own fiscal autonomy, then we could argue for so much more after that.
Well, I mean, if
it would make sense, because everything would fall into line.
Well, Chris,
and they would have to give us it.
I think you're right, because on the one hand, if Scotland were to get borrowing powers of the kind that are being asked for, it would pretty much add up to a federal state, wouldn't it? Where Scotland would actually be de facto independent, but would be kind of under the umbrella of the United Kingdom. Yeah,
but then we were told by Gordon Brown that it was it's going to be as Devo Max, as close to federalism as possible, and all the rest of it. And that was never delivered because the establishment said no. You're not getting that. We do not want you to have that, because if Scotland was in charge of its fiscal policy, then we would actually show up England, and they would have to answer to their electorate as to why Scotland's getting it right and they're getting it wrong.
Okay, Chris. Well, listen, I'd like to just end that particular topic on that note for the moment, and moving along to our next story this evening. Now, on the same theme of job losses, it's now come to light that 5,300 jobs are to go as Boots and John Lewis announce store closures. John Lewis is permanently closing 8 of its 50 department stores, including big outlets like Birmingham and Watford, with a likely loss of 1,300 jobs. All 4 of the group's smaller at-home stores in Croydon, Newbury, Swindon and Tamworth are to close, as well as 2 outlets and travel hubs at Heathrow and St Pancras Station in London. John Lewis said the 8 shops were already financially challenged before the coronavirus crisis, and the pandemic had accelerated the switch from shopping in-store to online. Before the virus struck, 40% of John Lewis sales were online. This could now be closer to 60 or 70% of total sales this year and next, the company said in a statement. John Lewis job losses the John Lewis job loss news comes on the same day that Boots announced that it is to cut 4,000 jobs, 7% of its workforce, as it closes 48 opticians outlets and sheds roles at its head office and stores. The company, which has 2,465 stores, said that it was accelerating a restructuring plan after sales at its main Boots outlets dived 72% and sales at Boots opticians dived 48% during the high street lockdown imposed to prevent the spread of coronavirus. As an essential retailer, Boots was allowed to continue to trade during the lockdown, but the company said that more than 100 larger stores in city centres, stations and airports closed during the lockdown amid the shift to working from home. The number of visitors to its other outlets also dramatically reduced as other nearby stores remained closed and its profitable beauty and fragrance counters stayed shut. A reduction in visits to GPs during the lockdown also dampened demand for prescriptions at Boots pharmacies, with sales of that division down 1%. The company also admitted that it had lost a share to supermarkets as shoppers chose to visit less outlets during the pandemic. Boots said that online sales had soared 78% during the lockdown, and it would be investing more into online and digital services in the future. The company doubled capacity for home delivery during the lockdown, partly by selling up small local fulfilment centres. Effie, this story I think is fairly typical of some of the larger high street stores that are discovering now that they are having to move forward their plans to go more online. Do you think the coronavirus has done some good in some ways by forcing the stores into taking this action earlier?
You mean in terms of moving some of their trade online as opposed to physical stores?
Do you think it actually will do these companies more good in the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course it will. The problem is, Gordon, here, and I'm not going to philosophize for too long on that, but I think we need to take a good long look in the mirror and think about what we're doing. Some of these companies, I mean, for the length of time that I can at least remember, say the last 20 years, they have grown so large. This is a really bad side of almost criminal corporatism. So they have encroached on the space of independent retailers, independent pharmacists. The rentals, as a consequence of that, and the high street have literally skyrocketed,
Indeed.
accompanied by rates. And all of the independents have disappeared. So all you've got at the moment is these huge, big structures who literally make the rules. They can hire you, they can fire you at will. They can move their business about. And also, let's not forget that in anticipation to Brexit, these people were probably already preparing to do stuff like that. For example, I had read a report earlier in the year in regards to Rolls-Royce and what have you. So this isn't something that they've not been thinking about maybe for a good couple of years now. So yeah, COVID has given them, a good narrative, perhaps to them, some of them a good excuse as well. But we need to think about people's creativity and people actually opening businesses and doing some good work as opposed to being slaves to these huge, big corporate structures. And what this does, not only to the economy, but also to society and to families and to young workers and people training. So yeah, a little bit of, a little bit of food for thought there. But yeah, I was expecting that. And although I believe that Rishi had announced a scheme whereby they would be supported. I believe it was £1,000 per employee for those furloughed to get back to work. Again, you see, that's not going to do anything. If they want to get rid of people, they will. There is no legislation to stop them. There is no union action that will stop them. They will go ahead and do it. Let's hope that these people, there isn't a huge, massive, spike in poverty in the next year or so.
Okay, Chris, just come back to you on this issue of the job losses. Now, is it a tremendous number of jobs being lost from these huge companies? 10,000 jobs in a single announcement is a great deal of human misery. The question is that if these companies are restructured and go much more online, where are the jobs going to come from for people who want to buy products from these companies in the future?
Exactly, and what Rishi Sunak has done is that he has invented this scheme. This plan has been devised, probably by Dominic Cummings.
Sounds like it.
And it's basically to avoid a cliff edge of jobs going now. And it will be done over a period of time between now and between January of next year, because they can't afford to have a shed load of people taken off of furlough and put straight onto universal credit.
Yeah.
I was going to say unemployment benefit, but
basically they're becoming unemployed, Chris. Yeah.
But yeah, so they don't want to have that all in the one fell swoop. So what they would much rather do is very much smoke and mirrors. Is that you are going to have some, and people are just going to suck it up, buttercup, because things are moving online, and the whole way that life is operating just now has got to change, and we've just got to accept that. So that'll just get put down to natural wastage. And then when we come to so that'll get them through Christmas. And then when we get to January, there's more job losses and all the rest of it. Yes, but that's because people didn't diversify, and we've got a skills gap here and we've got a skills gap there. So there was nothing in this budget, talking about, there was a lot of talk made about the fact that the training facilities that the arrivals they made actually reminded me of the op schemes of Thatcher.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
they did.
6-month apprenticeship for basically bugger all, because there are not going to be any industries going into 2021 because they haven't invested in, you know, there was nothing there. There was nothing for green energy deals.
Nope,
There was
no, I
nothing
noticed
for
that.
renewables. There was nothing for R&D. You know, so, you know, after 6 months, these people are going to have nothing. And it's all about massaging the figures. That's what it's all about.
Do you think, Chris, that there is a plan behind this, that perhaps Dominic Cummings is intentionally basically driving people to unemployment so he can restart the economy in some new form or in some new way of his own devising?
Well, look, I mean, what we're looking at is, and I can see it, you know, and Richard Leonard made great hay out of, you know, and I found it absolutely incredible, cringeworthy, really, you know, because I've been saying this stuff for years. You know, the airport handlers, I'm not going to name them, but the airport handlers, and there are several at Glasgow Airport, but basically they are pursuing a sack them and rehire them on a half-baked terms and conditions. So basically, if someone's earning, just for argument's sake, £15 an hour, you're going to get thrown out on the street. You can reapply for your job. They'll pay you £7.50 an hour. There'll be no terms and conditions with that. There'll be zero sick pay. There'll be zero holiday pay, and everything will be in the benefit of the handling agents, and nothing will be in benefit of the workers.
Well, it
And
sounds
that's
like
what the Tories are doing.
sounds like a rather typical.
Trashed the trade union bill.
Yeah.
And this is what they want to do. They want to strip the British workers of their terms and conditions that have been hard fought and hard won through European invention.
Of course.
And at the EU's behest.
Okay. Chris, actually, this is probably quite a good time for me to switch stories, because your mentioning of the European Union there actually leads into the next story, which indeed has some bearing on this. Now, Michel Barnier, the chief European Union negotiator, says that significant differences persist in the Brexit talks. The European Union's chief Brexit negotiator said today that significant divergences persisted in its talks with the United Kingdom government on their new relationship from 2021. The UK is in a standstill transition period, remaining in its single market and customs union until the 31st of December, to give time for a new relationship on everything from trade to security to be agreed. Negotiations have so far failed to bridge the gaps over fisheries and fair competition guarantees, amongst other issues. And Barnier said that after the latest talks in London, this week's discussions confirm that significant divergences remain between the EU and the UK. We will continue working with patience, respect and determination. The negotiators meet again in Brussels next week, but the European Commission said that there will be changes from 2021 in trade in goods and services, energy and legal cooperation, travel and tourism, regardless of whether there is a new deal or not. The fact that the United Kingdom will no longer participate in union policies as of the end of the transition period will create barriers to trade in goods and services and to cross-border mobility and exchanges that do not exist today, the Commission said in a note. These inevitable disruptions will occur as of the 1st of January 2021 and risk compounding the pressure that businesses are already under due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The Commission had urged countries, companies and individuals to prepare for more elaborate customs formalities for goods crossing between the UK and the EU, for more thorough procedures to recognise transport licences or professional qualifications, as well as tighter checks on travellers, among other aspects. Effie, now this story obviously is very bad news for Scotland and very bad news for the rest of the United Kingdom. But I think the question has got to be, why is it that the British government is so intent on leaving without a deal? What do you think the big plan is here? The reason why they are persisting in this line of not cooperating with the EU in negotiations?
Well, Gordon, just follow the money. The whole Brexit affair. We've analysed it many times. With great insight on this program, and it has been analysed by economists and academics and people. The whole idea behind Brexit is deregulation, and I'm just going to go back to what Chris just mentioned. A couple of minutes ago, in regards to workers' rights. So, the idea is, as you pointedly said, if they get rid of people, if there is massive unemployment and there are no safeguards, as we know them, and as we have developed and helped develop and known them over the last at least 30 years, supported by the whole of the European Union, protected by the European Court of Human Rights, and protected by them being justiciable by European courts. So ultimately, you can take your case before the European courts. Now you will no longer have this safeguard as of the 1st of January. So if they get rid of you, they can actually rehire you on pretty much any terms they please. They have made this clear in terms of both regulations, in terms of human rights, in terms of protections, in terms of pharmaceuticals, in terms of defense, in terms of cooperation, even satellites and nuclear and quality of life and all the rest of it. So it isn't to the people who are marketing and supporting this action. And let's not fool ourselves. This is a very small minority of people who have got a hold of power in London within Westminster. To them, this is a big win. This is a very, very big victory, what they're about to experience. Also, let's not forget, you only have to go back to the Financial Times. I think it was an article published about a year ago. I think it's close to 2/3 of £1 trillion we're talking about positions or shorting the pound and hedge funds being depending on a no-deal Brexit. So a very small number of individuals will literally become incredibly rich overnight when this happens.
This so-called disaster capitalism has been mentioned in the media before. In fact, I saw a figure.
Criminal corporatism. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I saw a figure yesterday, I think, in another publication, an inside publication for financiers, which said something like £4.5 billion worth of short positions depended upon a no-deal Brexit. In other words, £4.5 billion has been gambled on no deal.
And let's just remind ourselves of the beautiful face of Crispin Odey, the large gentleman who was former son-in-law to Rupert Murdoch. And overnight, on Brexit night, I think he made about £120 million. So, and this happened within literally about an hour and a half. There are many Crispin Odeys, and he is a little bit of a strange figure, but he is not on his own. And the Tory party are supported; their donors are literally these people, so they will push for that, and it will happen. Now, what's going to happen to Scotland? You're talking. I've used the word before. I don't think it's too dramatic, and I'm going to say again, it will be a catastrophe.
Okay, Effie, thank you for that. You've made your feelings abundantly clear there. Okay, Chris, just one word from you before we leave this topic. I know how you feel about this kind of thing, but disaster capitalism, is that the only reason why Brexit is occurring? Or is there something more fundamental, more ideological, that the UK wants to be more American or more linked to America?
Well, no, there is that as well, but basically in a nutshell, that's what it is disaster capitalism. And I find it really bizarre, the fact that I have learned all this, right? I'm not, I'm not like Effie, who is an academic. I'm just a foot soldier. I've just been a trade union rep and stuff like that. I've just been putting my nose to the grindstone, and I can see it. It's as plain as the nose in my face. But yet there are people out there that can't see it. And that's what really hits me. So, in a scale of 1 to 10, I would put myself down as a 4. I would maybe put Effie up as about an 8.
Oh,
right?
you're too. Oh, don't.
And
Please, you're too kind.
yet,
No.
so, I mean, if I can see it and Effie can see it, why the heck can other people not see it? Because it is nothing short of disaster capitalism. And, you know, unfortunately, the people that vote Tory, they love capitalism. They can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And again, you have to wonder at the mindset of normal, average working people who could ever countenance to vote Tory.
Okay. Well, listen,
It's
thank
just
you.
bizarre. And then you've got to look at the other side of the lobby, and then you look at Labour and you go, aye, well, right enough. No wonder they voted Tory, because there's nothing Labour there to vote.
Okay, well, Chris, listen, I'd like to leave that subject for the moment. And speaking of things which you can't see, brings us to our next story. The WHO, the World Health Organization, says that airborne transmission of coronavirus can occur during medical procedures. The World Health Organization, the WHO, has said today that airborne transmission of the novel coronavirus can occur during medical procedures that generate aerosols. The agency said that some outbreak reports related to indoor crowded spaces have suggested the possibility of aerosol transmission combining with droplet transmission, such as during choir practice, in restaurants or in fitness classes. On Tuesday, the WHO acknowledged emerging evidence of airborne spread of the novel coronavirus after a group of scientists urged the global body to update its guidance on how the respiratory disease spreads. Effie, this sounds like a little bit of a scary story, but I think the WHO has been quite measured in its reaction to it. They've said that they now acknowledge that it's possible that coronavirus might spread in very fine particles, aerosols, so-called aerosols, tiny particles, droplets of moisture in the air. Now, I've also heard it said that dentists are now able to give treatment in Scotland, but not involving aerosol type procedures. Do you know what they mean by aerosols? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Hi, Gordon. I've lost you there. Hello.
No.
Could you just repeat that last bit for me? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Did you not catch that?
Yeah.
I was just asking you
Yeah.
I was just asking if you had heard of this aerosol transmission before.
No, I haven't, but I think that just having read broadly, obviously I'm not in the medical profession, about the transmission, just thinking about how contagious the disease is, and also the report that came out of, I believe it was Texas, where all the different types of activities were actually graded as, you know, in terms of how risk averse they were.
Yeah.
And indoor gyms and restaurants, and bars were the highest risk environment for the transmission of the virus. So I'm not at all surprised to hear that this now needs to be made clear. I think this has actually been the position subtly, literally from day one. But obviously not in those terms. But again, the guidance that we're getting is economy-led, and I'm not sure that the Scottish government, if we were independent, they would still be pursuing this route. I have my own doubts, but I think it's got to be UK-led.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, if I could come to you briefly on this. Bearing in mind what the WHO is now saying, that it might well be possible for this disease to be inhaled as tiny droplets just wafting around in the air like that. Surely now it's more important than ever to wear a mask, specifically when you're in shops or pubs, restaurants, at any place where it's busy indoors.
It's imperative, Gordon. If we want to continue seeing Scotland with a rate 5 times lower than England,
and no deaths.
Nicola pointed out wonderfully this afternoon, the Tories didn't like it. They didn't like it at all.
I'm sure they didn't.
And you know, it's again, it's as plain as the nose in your face. It's best practice. You know, I mean, being a trade union rep, also trained in health and safety. You have to consider your own health and safety. You have to consider the health and safety of other people around you.
Yeah.
And Nicola also made the point, as well, as the reason that dentists won't be fully operational is because there's been a study into the mist that is created when the dentist actually drills into your teeth.
Yes.
So quite rightly, that's how detailed the information that the Scottish Government are taking on. And so there is, if you want to, put it like there's a reason to the madness, then all those reasons are clinically driven. And have been advised by the WHO. And basically, if the WHO are saying wear a mask, wear a mask.
Fair enough, Chris. Yeah, okay, listen, thank you for that. Speaking of wearing masks, brings us beautifully to the next story, a bizarre story, in fact. The Brazil Press Association has filed a criminal complaint against the president, Mr. Bolsonaro. The Brazilian Press Association filed a criminal complaint to the Supreme Court against President Jair Bolsonaro today after he took off his mask in a televised interview in which he announced that he had tested positive for the novel coronavirus. Bolsonaro made his announcement on Tuesday. His illness is a potent symbol of his government's botched response to the outbreak in Brazil, the second worst in the world. More than 1.7 million people in Brazil have tested positive for coronavirus, and nearly 68,000 people have died. Brazilian broadcasters pulled journalists off the job after they were exposed to Bolsonaro in the interview, quarantining them until they test negative for the disease. In its complaint, the Press Association alleged that Bolsonaro had committed at least 2 crimes related to putting somebody's life or health at imminent risk and failing to prevent the spread of an infectious disease. The Brazilian Press Association, the prestigious professional group that advocates for journalism, asked that its complaint be sent to the Attorney General's office to decide on whether there were grounds to proceed with a criminal probe. Bolsonaro, 65, is currently in quarantine and has said that he is feeling well. The far-right former army captain has a prickly relationship with journalists, alleging unfair treatment, and he is quick to label unfavourable coverage as fake news. The President's office did not respond to a request for a comment. Okay, first of all, let me come to you, Effie, on this one. This is a very strange story. But very quickly, what's your reaction to this story, Effie?
Well, I'm not at all surprised. I don't believe Bolsonaro, so whether he has or hasn't got it, we don't know, and we will never find out. His fascist practices have been looked at and raised by people, including academics, including observers. Brazil is actually also one of the hardest hit areas in terms of coronavirus. But again, the data coming out of Brazil can never be accurate because of the way his government operates. He is a very, very repugnant personality himself. He's Indeed. A pretty awful man, a misogynist. So I'm not surprised. Okay. Does he have it? Does he not have it? Was this part of a show? I don't know. I don't know, Gordon. Okay,
Effie, listen, thank you very much for that. I'd like to move on to our next story, and that is about Russian television. RT has been taken off the air by some Baltic nations. Latvia and Lithuania have taken Russian broadcaster RT off the air over alleged ties to the EU-sanctioned Russian media executive Dmitry Kozolyev. The broadcasting bans in Latvia and Lithuania were based on information that Kozolyev, who had been sanctioned by the EU over his central role in Russian government propaganda supporting its military action in Ukraine, de facto controls RT. Kozolyev was appointed by President Vladimir Putin in 2013 to lead news organizations that promote Russia abroad. I think they're worried that after Latvia and Lithuania, other EU countries could determine the connection and more bans will follow, said Mantas Martisias, who is the head of Lithuania's media regulator. Lithuania had acted on information from the country's foreign affairs ministry that Rossija Sevodnya was led by Kozolyev and is in charge of RT, according to Martisias. Latvia's media regulator, in its decision, said that RT had tried to portray Latvia as a failed country and that Latvia's security services saw RT as an influential Russian propaganda channel operating in Western Europe. We have made the decision, based on information at our disposal, that these TV programs are under de facto control of Dmitry Kiselyov, said the Latvian regulator's chairman, Ivars Abalins, in a statement. RT's editor-in-chief, Margarita Simonian, claimed that Dmitry Kiselyov has no connection to RT. In a statement today, she said Dmitry Kiselyov heads the news agency MIA Rosia Sevvodnya. And actually that translates to literally as Russia Today. Chris, I didn't get a chance to ask you in the last item for a response to this, to that. But for this one, I think this is an interesting story that these two countries are banning RT.
Well, it's no surprise. I mean, RT have been, funnily enough, in and out of the news for the last 10 years because, the right-wing governments of Britain and America and even Australia, they just don't like RT, and it's just because it is Russian television. Now, if anybody's watched RT, it's actually one of the most informative news channels, with the exception of this one, of course. But RT is, I actually find RT to be very, very non-biased, insofar as
Chris, I would.
It isn't all about Russia. You know what I mean? They have got British offices, they've got American offices, they've got offices in Europe, and they report the news. That's what they do. They are journalists. So, for people to ban them, they're only banning them because their output doesn't fit their narrative. That's it.
Well, it's well recognised, I think, Chris, that the Russian state has a big interest in trying to destabilise Europe in any way it can, and particularly Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which are literally on the front door of the Russian border. Do you not think, Chris, that the fact that RT tends to also carry an awful lot of military hardware documentaries as well does tend to paint it more of a kind of propaganda channel?
It does, yes. And look, I'm not pushing RT. I'm not supportive of it. All I'm saying is that there is a plethora of news services throughout the world. And even if you look at CCCT, which is the state-owned Chinese broadcaster, it's just about on par with RT as well. It is used for propagating propaganda. And we see it in the BBC as well.
All right, well, Chris,
it's just the fact that someone has actually stood up and said, "We're not having this," and they've taken offence to it.
Well, Chris, to be fair, the European Union has said they're not having it. They're the ones who sanctioned this man in the first place. And
but that's exactly what I'm saying. They are basically saying, we don't approve of your content and we're pulling you. That's it.
It's actually not the content, Chris, that they're taking issue with. It's the man controlling the channel that they take issue with.
He is the one guy who has got the major influence in it.
Well, I think we all have. People have different opinions on this, Chris. I can respect the fact. Effie, what's your reaction to this story? Why on earth do you think the Latvians, Lithuanians are wanting rid of RT? What's the threat to them?
Well, because the thing is, it's a threat to them, and the personality behind it. You need to repeat that name now because I can't actually pronounce his name. He's within the one beginning with a K. He is a very, very controversial personality, and I think Having looked into this on the periphery of it, really, I'm no expert. I believe he's very much controlled by the Kremlin. This particular person. So there are, as Chris said, yeah, sometimes you get some interesting stuff going on there and interesting debates. But fundamentally, I think the strings are pulled by the Kremlin, and this is where the problem lies, and especially in regards to how hostile the Kremlin over the last few years has been towards Latvia and Lithuania. So that is why they had to take the direct action.
Okay. Well, fair enough. I mean, somebody was saying the other day that, would you want the BBC coming into Scotland after independence? And that is, I think, another way of looking at this. Anyway,
it is, but it is. And actually, to be honest with you, I think the BBC, we're a free country and everyone conceivably would be welcome. But I think maybe there would have to be a proper national broadcaster after independence. That would be my hope. At least.
Okay. And that hopefully will be us, Effie.
Broadcasting Scotland, that will be.
Okay. And on to our final story this evening, because we are running a little bit behind time. And a Mau Mau fighter has recalled British colonial abuses in Kenya. Although he's nearly 100, Gitu wa Kahengeri clearly remembers the day when, as a prisoner of Kenya's colonial occupier, he wanted to die. I was beaten all day until I did not feel pain any longer, he said. One episode of abuse during the 7 years that he spent in camps that the UK colonial government ran the decade before Kenyan independence in 1963. Tens of thousands are thought to have died in the camps, which are a traumatic but largely forgotten part of Kenya's past. They were set up to jail activists and sympathisers during the Mau Mau uprising of 1952 to 1960, in which Kahengeri, born in the 1920s and a Secretary General of the Independence Movement's Veterans Association, participated. Using eyewitness accounts, documents and field visits, Kenyan and British historians from the Museum of British Colonialism are now building an online archive of the period, complete with 3D recreations of some of the camps. These include 27-year-old Chao Tayana Mayana. I've been through the public education system and not once do I remember hearing about detention camps, she said. There was a sense of betrayal. I didn't understand how this was not taught. Mayana recalls the shock she felt when a few years ago she read Britain's Gulag, an account by an American historian, Caroline Elkins, who estimates that over 100,000 detainees may have died in the camps, victims of the combined effects of exhaustion, disease, starvation and systematic brutality. Other historians have put the death toll in the tens of thousands. In 2013, Britain made an out-of-court settlement of £20 million to 5 claimants represented by the Mau Mau Association, and a public statement of regret for the abuses committed. Chris, if I could very quickly come to you for a very short reaction to this story, please.
Well, I mean, really, this is a story fit for a good friend of mine, Sir Geoffrey Palmer.
Yeah.
At Edinburgh Heriot Watt University. Listen, look, Britain's past and the Britain's colonial past, you couldn't even say it was checkered, because it's not checkered.
No.
It's absolutely
horrific.
Bloodstained. It really is, and it's a subject that I could honestly, I could rant all night about it, but I know that you're pressed for time. But this is definitely, if anybody wants to find out anything about British colonialism, have a look at the work of Sir Geoffrey Palmer. Absolutely outstanding.
Okay, thank you for that, Chris. Effie, have you got a take on this story?
Well, I'm just gonna reiterate, much to a lot of people's disappointment, what Jacob Rees-Mogg mentioned a few months ago on Question Time when he was challenged on the Kenyan uprising. Yeah. He said these people, he said, were put in camps for their own protection. I think this pretty much sums up the British, the Anglo-centric position as to how you subject people to colonialism. These were crimes that were committed against people. Most of them were actually genocidal crimes. And before we can say that we've got a great education system, I believe we need to have a proper and insightful appreciation and assessment of what British colonialism and the British Empire really means.
Okay, Effie, thank you for ending our story tonight. That is about all we have time for this evening. Of course, if you would like to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter and help us with a donation every month and become a regular supporter, then you can do so by following the steps on your screen now. Go to www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register. That is it from Thursday's edition of Scotland at 7. Just remains for me to thank my two guests, Chris McCusker and Effie Samara. Thank you both. And I will be back again on Monday with Scotland at 7 once more. Thanks for watching and good night. Hooray!